He came to fix her bookshelf, a simple favor for a widow he barely knew. But when Miriam whispered, "You see me like no one else does," the air turned electric. What she did next would haunt him for years. I never imagined that a routine jog through Elmwood Park could unravel my carefully balanced life. But looking back, that's precisely where it all began. At 23, I was navigating the choppy waters of early adulthood in Harlow, this unassuming town nestled in Oregon's rolling hills. Fresh out of college with a graphic design degree, I scraped by on freelance gigs, crafting logos for local businesses, troubleshooting tech issues for neighbors, anything to cover the rent on my cramped apartment on Willow Creek Lane. The park was my sanctuary, a vast expanse of emerald lawns dotted with ancient fir trees, their branches whispering in the breeze, and a serene pond where ducks glided effortlessly. That crisp autumn morning, the air nipped at my skin, invigorating yet sharp, as I pounded the winding paths, my sneakers crunching over fallen leaves, trying to outpace the nagging doubts about my future that always seemed to catch up. As I looped around the weathered stone bridge for the second time, my eyes caught her silhouette on a bench overlooking the pond. She sat motionless, her gaze lost in the rippling water, exuding a quiet elegance that drew me in despite myself. She appeared to be in her early 40s, perhaps 42, with an aura of composed maturity that spoke of years weathering life's storms, subtle lines around her eyes hinting at laughter and sorrow alike. Her auburn hair was swept into a loose ponytail, a few strands escaping to frame her face, and she wore a wool coat that hugged her frame against the chill, paired with faded jeans that suggested practicality over pretense. I didn't know her story then, but whispers around town later filled in the blanks. Miriam Voss, widow of the esteemed architect Elias Voss, who'd perished in a tragic car accident on Highway 47 2 years prior. She'd retreated from Harlow's social scene, channeling her energy into raising her teenage daughter, Lila, in their modest home on Cedar Ridge Drive. I intended to keep running, maintaining my rhythm, but as I passed her, our eyes locked for a fleeting instant. Hers were a rich hazel, flecked with amber that caught the morning light, piercing through me with an intensity that made my stride falter. It was as if she saw beyond my sweaty exterior to the vulnerabilities I hid, the uncertainty of my path, the loneliness of post-college limbo. Shaking it off as imagination, I pressed on, but on my next circuit, she was still there, now standing as if anticipating my return. She raised a hand hesitantly, her posture straight yet somehow fragile. "Excuse me," she called, her voice carrying a gentle timbre with a faint lilt, perhaps a remnant of her family's Eastern European heritage. I slowed to a halt, yanking out my earbuds, my chest heaving from the exertion. "Yeah?" I managed, wiping sweat from my brow, feeling suddenly self-conscious in my worn running gear. She paused, clutching a small notebook, her fingers trembling slightly in the cool air. "I'm so sorry to interrupt your run, but could you help with my phone? It just went dead, and I need to reach my daughter. She's expecting me to pick her up soon." She extended an older smartphone, its screen blank and unresponsive, her hand steady despite the plea in her eyes. I nodded, catching my breath. "No problem. I'm decent with gadgets." Fixing tech was part of my odd job repertoire, a skill honed from countless late-night tinkers. As I took the device, our fingers grazed, a cool, fleeting contact that sent an unexpected warmth coursing up my arm. I dismissed it as post-run adrenaline, focusing instead on troubleshooting, checking the ports, attempting a force restart. She watched intently, her presence close enough that I caught the subtle scent of lavender lingering on her coat. "Thank you," she said as the screen flickered back to life after a prolonged button hold. "You're a lifesaver. I'm Miriam." Her relief was palpable, softening her features into a genuine smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. "Nolan," I replied, handing it back, our hands brushing once more. This time the touch lingered a fraction longer, and I felt a stir of something indefinable. Curiosity, perhaps, or an unwelcome intrigue. She was clearly from a different chapter of life, her maturity a stark contrast to my youthful fumbling. Glad it worked. I jog here most days. It's my way to unwind. She tucked the phone away, her gaze holding mine. I come for the peace too. Clears the mind. A pause stretched between us, the wind rustling leaves overhead, ducks quacking in the distance. The conversation could have ended there, a polite exchange between strangers, but neither of us moved. Instead, she asked about my routine, and I found myself opening up, about the freelance grind, the rejections from design firms in Portland, the pressure to prove myself. She listened with undivided attention, nodding empathetically. Starting out is tough. My late husband Elias built his architecture firm from scratch here in Harlow. It took patience. Her voice hitched on his name, a subtle crack revealing the depth of her loss. I'd heard the town gossip at Hazelnut Haven, the cozy bakery on Elm Street. Elias had designed local landmarks like the community library extension, his sudden death leaving a void in the community, and more profoundly, in her life. "I'm sorry," I said, the words feeling inadequate. "That must be incredibly hard." She glanced at the pond, her expression distant. "It is. But we keep going, for Lila, my daughter." Then, brightening slightly, she steered the talk to lighter topics. The new artisan breads at the bakery, the upcoming harvest festival at the town hall. Our words flowed effortlessly, laced with an undercurrent I couldn't ignore, the way her eyes lingered on mine, the subtle shift in her posture when I spoke. She was beautiful in a timeless way, her poise drawing me despite the chasm of experience between us. I was just a guy sketching dreams on a tablet. She carried the weight of real life, real grief. As minutes turned to nearly an hour, she checked her phone. I should head out for Lila. Standing, she hesitated, her hand brushing her coat pocket. "If you're ever looking for a quiet spot to work on those designs, our home has a study with Elias's old drafting table. It's unused now." I chuckled softly, masking my surprise. "That's generous, but I wouldn't want to intrude." "It's no trouble," she replied, her tone dropping to a near whisper. "Company can be comforting sometimes." With that, she walked away, her steps measured, leaving me staring after her, a mix of confusion and quiet exhilaration churning inside. I finished my run, but my thoughts circled back to her, the accidental touches, the depth in her voice. Back at my apartment, amid scattered sketches and coffee mugs, my phone pinged with an unknown number. "Proper thanks for the help today. Coffee tomorrow? My treat." Miriam. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering. She was older, a widow navigating loss, worlds apart from my aimless 20s, yet, I replied, "Sounds good." We met at Hazelnut Haven, its brick walls and pastry aromas creating a cozy bubble. She waited by the window, 2 steaming cups ready. "You came," she said, her smile easing the knot in my chest. Couldn't resist free coffee. We delved deeper, her managing Elias's firm administratively, my aspirations for album covers. Her laugh was melodic, her insights sharp, but an unspoken tension hummed. Our knees nearly touching under the table, her gaze holding longer than casual. Weeks blurred into a pattern. Park walks, minor house fixes. One day, her laptop glitch prompted a visit to Cedar Ridge Drive, a serene street of charming homes. Inside, the air held fresh laundry and baking scents. The study brimmed with books and memories. As I debugged, our proximity built electricity. Knees brushing, her watching intently. Post-fix, kitchen cookies led to sunset talks on the porch. "The house feels less empty with you here," she admitted softly. I felt the same, but said nothing, our hands inches apart on the railing. Evenings evolved, dinner with Lila, her vibrant energy contrasting Miriam's quiet grace. After Lila's bedtime, porch teas turned intimate. "You're young, Nolan, full of potential," she said one night, her voice laced with unspoken regret. "So are you," I countered, the air thick. She leaned closer, hand almost reaching, but withdrew. "Come back tomorrow?" "Garden needs help." I agreed, knowing it was more. Next day, backyard toil, soil under nails, laughter amid weeds, hands met in dirt, lingering, evening wash-up in the kitchen, her flushed face close. "Nolan," she breathed, stepping nearer. "What?" I asked, heart pounding. She whispered, "Come to my place." The words hung, heavy with implication, though we were already there. It felt like an invitation to something deeper, unspoken. This is just the beginning. You can't even imagine what she'll decide to do in a few hours. The words lingered in the air, heavier than the autumn dusk settling over Harlow. Miriam's whisper, "Come to my place," echoed in my mind as I drove back to my apartment that night, the headlights of my beat-up pickup cutting through the gathering fog. At 23, I was used to uncertainty, job rejections, late-night sketches that went nowhere, the constant feeling of being stuck in a town that felt too small for my dreams. But this was different. This wasn't about logos or deadlines. This was about her, Miriam Voss, 42, maybe 43, with her auburn hair catching the last light of day, her hazel eyes carrying a grief and grace that made my own struggles feel trivial. She was a widow, a mother, a woman whose life was a tapestry of love and loss, while I was just a kid fumbling through my first steps into adulthood. Yet, every time I saw her, something shifted inside me, like a compass needle quivering toward a direction I wasn't sure I should follow. The next morning, I woke to a sky bruised with clouds, the kind that threatened rain but held back, mirroring the tension knotting my chest. I'd agreed to return to her place on Cedar Ridge Drive, this time to fix a wobbly bookshelf in her study, a task that felt like another excuse to bridge the gap between us. My apartment on Willow Creek Lane was a mess of sketch pads and empty coffee mugs, but I barely noticed as I grabbed my toolbox and headed out, the engine's rumble doing little to drown out my thoughts. What was I doing? Helping a neighbor? Or chasing something that could unravel us both? The street was quiet, lined with craftsman homes and manicured lawns, and her house stood out with its wraparound porch and flower beds bursting with late-season color, a testament to her care despite the weight she carried. She answered the door in a soft gray sweater and jeans, her hair loose, cascading in gentle waves that caught the muted daylight. "Nolan, you're here," she said, her smile warm but tinged with a flicker of hesitation, like she was as unsure about this as I was. "Come in. Lila's at a friend's house until tonight, so it's just us." Her voice held a quiet invitation, not overt but undeniable, and it sent a shiver through me as I stepped inside. The house was as I remembered, warm, lived in, scented with fresh laundry and a faint hint of cinnamon from something baking in the oven. She led me to the study, past a hallway lined with framed photos, her and Elias on their wedding day, Lila as a gap-toothed kid, moments frozen from a life that no longer existed. The bookshelf was a heavy oak piece, leaning slightly, its shelves cluttered with books and architectural journals. "Elias built this," she said, running a hand along its edge, her fingers lingering as if touching a memory. "It's been unsteady for a while. I keep putting it off." "I'll take care of it," I said, setting down my toolbox and kneeling to inspect the base. As I tightened screws and checked for loose joints, she stayed close, handing me a wrench or pointing out a wobbly corner. Our hands brushed once, twice, each contact sending a jolt through me that I tried to ignore. She was so near I could feel the warmth of her presence, smell the lavender of her perfume mingling with the woodsy scent of the study. Her sweater clung softly to her frame, and I caught myself noticing the curve of her collarbone, the way her hair fell across her shoulder when she leaned in to watch. "You're good at this," she said, her voice low, almost intimate. "Fixing things, making them steady." I glanced up, meeting her eyes. They were steady, searching, and for a moment, I forgot about the screwdriver in my hand. "Just takes patience," I replied, my voice rougher than I intended. Her gaze held mine, and the room seemed to shrink, the air thick with something unspoken. I forced myself to focus, tightening the last screw, but my pulse hammered in my ears. When the bookshelf stood firm, she stepped back, running her fingers along the polished wood. "Thank you, Nolan. It's perfect." She paused, her eyes flicking to the drafting table across the room, still dusted with neglect. "You should use it sometime, for your designs. It's a good space. Quiet. Focused." I stood, wiping my hands on my jeans, and moved toward the table, drawn by the idea of sketching there, in a space that held so much of her history. "Maybe I will," I said, tracing the table's edge, imagining lines and colors taking shape under my hands. But my thoughts weren't on art. They were on her, standing just behind me, her breath soft in the silence. She stepped closer, her shoulder brushing mine as she looked at the table too. "Elias loved working here, said it was where his best ideas came to life." Her voice was tinged with nostalgia, but there was something else. Vulnerability, perhaps, or an invitation to share this space in a way that felt dangerously personal. I turned to face her, and she was closer than I expected, her eyes locked on mine, hazel depths swirling with emotions I couldn't fully read. The grandfather clock in the hall ticked relentlessly, marking the seconds as the world seemed to pause. "You're different, Nolan," she said suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not like most people your age. You see things. You listen." My throat tightened. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, her lips parting as if searching for the right words. "You notice the small things, the way I hold my coffee mug when I'm nervous, the way I avoid saying his name sometimes." She swallowed, her gaze unwavering. "Most people don't see that. They just see the widow." I didn't know how to respond, so I just held her gaze, feeling the weight of her words settle between us. The silence was electric, charged with a tension that made my skin prickle. I wanted to say something, to bridge the gap, but my voice felt trapped. Instead, I reached out, my hand hovering near hers, not quite touching. Her fingers twitched, as if considering closing the distance, but then her phone buzzed on the desk, shattering the moment. She glanced at it, her expression tightening. "Lila's group is running late. I'll need to pick her up soon." But she didn't move toward the door. Instead, she sat on the edge of the drafting table, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, as if anchoring herself. "Do you want tea, or maybe stay a bit longer?" I should have said no. I had a logo deadline for a cafe on Main Street, sketches piling up on my desk, but the pull of her presence was stronger. "Tea sounds good," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. In the kitchen, she brewed chamomile, the steam curling between us as we sat at the small oak table, its surface worn smooth by years of family meals. The conversation meandered, her love for old novels, my failed attempt at learning to cook anything beyond ramen, the way Harlow's foggy winters seemed to seep into your bones. But beneath the words, something else simmered. Her foot brushed mine under the table, a fleeting contact that neither of us acknowledged, yet neither pulled away. The air felt heavy, like the moment before a storm breaks. "You ever think about leaving Harlow?" she asked, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug, her eyes fixed on the tea as if it held answers. "All the time," I admitted, leaning back in my chair. "I want to design for bigger projects, album covers, book jackets, something that matters. But this place, it's home. Hard to let go." She nodded, her gaze distant. I thought about it after Elias, moving somewhere new, starting fresh. But Lila's life is here, her friends, her school, and I'm not sure I'd know how to be anyone else somewhere else. Her voice cracked slightly, and I saw the weight of her loss, the way it clung to her like a shadow. "You're braver than you think," I said, meaning every word. "Raising Lila, keeping the firm going, all of it, that's strength." She looked at me then, her eyes softening, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "You're kind to say that." Her hand moved across the table, stopping just short of mine. The space between our fingers was a chasm, yet it felt like a spark could bridge it. My heart pounded, urging me to close the gap, to feel her skin against mine, but I held back, aware of the invisible lines between us. Age, grief, responsibility. The afternoon slipped away, our conversation weaving through safer topics. The new murals at the community center, my obsession with vinyl records. But the tension remained, a quiet hum beneath every word. As the light faded, she stood to check the oven, pulling out a tray of cinnamon scones, their warmth filling the kitchen. We ate standing by the counter, crumbs dusting our fingers, laughing about my terrible baking attempts. But the laughter faded into a comfortable silence, her shoulder brushing mine as we leaned against the counter. "Nolan," she said suddenly, her voice low, almost hesitant. "Why do you keep coming back?" I froze, the scone halfway to my mouth. Her question hung there, raw and unguarded, demanding truth. I set the scone down, turning to face her. "Because I want to," I said simply, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "Because being here, with you, it feels right." Her breath caught, and for a moment, we just stood there, inches apart, the kitchen shrinking around us. Her eyes searched mine, and I saw the conflict within her. Desire warring with restraint, longing tangled with fear. She stepped closer, her hand reaching out as if to touch my arm, but she stopped, fingers trembling. "I should get ready to pick up Lila," she said, breaking the spell, but her voice was shaky, betraying her. "Yeah," I agreed, though every part of me wanted to stay, to see where this moment could lead. As I grabbed my toolbox, she followed me to the door, her presence a quiet pull. At the threshold she paused, her hand on the doorknob. "Nolan," she said softly, her eyes meeting mine. "Come back tomorrow? There's more to do in the garden." I nodded, my throat tight. "I'll be here." Driving home, the fog thicker now, my mind raced. This wasn't just about fixing shelves or pulling weeds. It was about us, about the line we were inching toward, one neither of us could fully name. She was a mother, a widow, a woman carrying a life I could barely comprehend. I was just Nolan Hargrove, a kid with dreams bigger than my bank account. But the pull between us was real, undeniable, and it scared me as much as it thrilled me. What she'll say next will change everything, for her and for him. The day dawned gray and heavy over Harlow, the sky a blanket of low-hanging clouds that mirrored the turmoil churning inside me. I tossed through the night, Miriam's question echoing like a distant thunder. "Why do you keep coming back?" At 23, I was no stranger to sleepless nights, worrying over unpaid bills, unfinished designs, the endless applications to firms in Portland that vanished into the void. But this was deeper, more personal. It was about her. Miriam Voss, a woman in her early 40s, her life marked by the kind of quiet resilience that came from enduring love, raising a child, and burying a husband. She moved through her days with a grace that intimidated me, her hazel eyes holding stories of joy and heartbreak I could only glimpse. I was just a young guy with a toolbox and big ideas, barely scratching the surface of adulthood, while she carried the weight of real responsibilities. Yet, the pull between us felt inevitable, like a current I couldn't resist, even as it dragged me toward waters I wasn't sure I could navigate. By noon, The clouds had thickened, a fine mist settling over the town as I drove to Cedar Ridge Drive. There was no specific errand this time, no shelf to fix, no gadget to troubleshoot. She'd simply said, "Come over. We can talk." Her text arriving like a lifeline in the quiet of my apartment. Willow Creek Lane felt even smaller that morning, my space cluttered with half-completed sketches and cold coffee, a reminder of the life I was putting on hold for these moments with her. Pulling into her driveway, I noticed the curtains drawn in the front windows, giving the house an air of seclusion amid the suburban calm. The neighborhood was hushed, most folks at work or school, leaving only the soft patter of rain on leaves to break the silence. My heart thudded as I climbed the porch steps, knuckles hesitating before knocking. What did I expect? Clarity? Closure? Or something more that scared me to admit? She opened the door almost immediately, as if she'd been waiting, dressed in a soft blouse that draped elegantly over her frame and slacks that spoke of casual comfort. Her hair was pulled back loosely, a few strands framing her face, and her smile was tentative, laced with the same uncertainty I felt. "Nolan," she said, her voice warm, yet edged with vulnerability, like a door creaking open to a room long closed. "Come in." I stepped inside, the familiar scents wrapping around me, fresh laundry mingled with the faint aroma of chamomile from the kitchen. The house felt different today, more intimate, the usual bustle absent with Lila at a weekend art class downtown. We moved to the living room, settling on the couch with a careful distance between us, though the space crackled with unspoken energy. She offered coffee, and I nodded, watching as she rose and headed to the kitchen, her movements fluid but deliberate, buying us both a moment to gather our thoughts. When she returned, handing me the mug, our fingers lingered in the exchange, a touch that sent warmth spreading through me, grounding yet electrifying. "I've been thinking about what I asked you last night," she said, settling back, her eyes fixed on her own cup as steam curled upward. "Why you keep coming here, and why I keep asking you to." I set my mug on the coffee table, the ceramic clinking softly against the wood. "And what did you figure out?" She looked up, her hazel gaze meeting mine, deep and searching, flecked with the gold that caught the dim light filtering through the curtains. "Because you make me feel seen, Nolan. After Elias, I buried parts of myself, focused on Lila, on the firm, on just getting through the days. But with you, it's like waking up. You don't pity me. You just are." Her words hung there, raw and honest, stirring something deep in my chest. "You're not someone to pity," I said, my voice steady despite the emotion rising. "You're strong, Miriam. Beautiful in ways that go beyond what people see on the surface. And being here, it makes me feel like I matter too." The admission slipped out, unguarded, and I saw her cheeks flush, her eyes glistening. She turned toward the window, where rain now tapped insistently against the glass, streaking down in rivulets that blurred the outside world. "You're so young," she murmured, her voice laced with a quiet ache. "You have adventures ahead, people your age to share them with." "What am I doing pulling you into this?" I shifted closer, the couch cushions dipping under my weight. "It's not about age, it's about this, whatever it is between us. We don't have to label it or plan it, just feel it." She nodded slowly, a single tear tracing down her cheek. I reached out, my thumb gently brushing it away, feeling the softness of her skin, the warmth beneath. She didn't pull back. Instead, her hand covered mine, holding it there against her face. In that instant, the barriers crumbled. The years between us, her grief, my inexperience, they faded into the background. It was just us, two people finding a fragile connection in the midst of life's chaos. She leaned forward, her forehead resting against mine, our breaths sinking in the quiet. The rain swelled outside, a rhythmic drum that isolated us, making the room feel like the only place that mattered. We stayed like that for what felt like hours, talking in hushed tones as the afternoon unfolded. She opened up more about Elias, not the polished anecdotes, but the real ones. The late nights arguing over designs, the quiet joys of building a home, the shattering void when he was gone. "I loved him with everything I had," she said, her voice trembling. "But grief doesn't erase the capacity for more. It just reshapes it, makes room for unexpected things." I shared my own vulnerabilities, the fear of never making it as a designer, the isolation of being back in Harlow after college, the way my dreams felt just out of reach. "You make me believe I can grab them," I confessed, my hand still in hers. "You see potential in me that I don't always see." As the light dimmed, the rain easing to a gentle drizzle, she stood, pulling me up with her. "Come with me," she said softly, her fingers interlaced with mine. She led me upstairs to her bedroom, a sanctuary I'd never entered, with a large bed draped in a handmade quilt, photos of Lila on the dresser, and a window overlooking the backyard where we'd gardened days before. She sat on the edge of the bed, patting the space beside her, and I joined her, the mattress shifting under our weight. "Nolan," she began, her voice barely audible, "I don't know if this is right. The world would say it's not. Me, with my past, you with your future. But I don't want you to go." I turned to her, cupping her face gently, feeling the rapid pulse at her jaw. "Then I'm staying." Our lips met then, soft and tentative at first, a brush that ignited a slow burn within me. It wasn't hurried or driven by impulse. It was deliberate, filled with the accumulated weight of our shared moments, the park encounters, the kitchen talks, the lingering touches. Her hands found my shoulders, drawing me closer, and I wrapped my arms around her, feeling the curve of her back, the steady rhythm of her heart against my chest. We explored each other slowly, breaths mingling, the rain a soft accompaniment outside. In that kiss, I tasted her vulnerability, her strength, and something deeper, a mutual need that transcended our differences. When we parted, breathless, she rested her head on my shoulder, her fingers tracing idle patterns on my arm. "This can't last forever," she whispered, her voice laced with regret. "You know that, don't you?" "I do," I replied, though the thought twisted in my gut. "But right now, it's what we have, and it's real." We lay back, still clothed, entwined in a quiet embrace as shadows lengthened across the room. She shared stories from her younger days, backpacking through Europe after college, meeting Elias in a quaint Prague cafe amid a downpour. I recounted my own memories, lazy summers at the local lake with friends, the thrill of my first paid design gig that felt like a door cracking open, laughter interspersed with silences, her head on my chest, my hand stroking her hair, the world outside fading entirely. As evening approached, my phone vibrated, a reminder of a freelance call I'd scheduled, pulling me back to reality. "I have to go," I said reluctantly, sitting up. She nodded, her expression a mix of contentment and sorrow. "Lila will be home soon." We descended the stairs in silence, the house now dim and peaceful. At the door, she kissed me once more, tender and lingering, a seal on the afternoon. "Thank you," she murmured against my lips, "for seeing me." I drove home through the damp streets, the rain-slicked roads reflecting streetlights like scattered stars. My mind was a whirlwind, elation mixed with doubt. What had we started? A fleeting comfort, or something that could shatter us? The age gap loomed larger now, her role as a mother, the potential whispers in Harlow's tight-knit community. Would we continue? Or was this a beautiful interlude, destined to end? days turned to weeks of stolen moments. I'd visit after dark, or we'd bump into each other at the park. Each encounter deepened our bond, helping with her firm's admin, refining my portfolio at the drafting table. But shadows crept in. Lila's curious questions about my frequent presence, Miriam's growing guilt. One evening, after Lila nearly caught us in a close moment, Miriam broke. "We can't keep this up," she said, tears streaming as I held her. "It's not fair to her, or to you." "What if we ease into it? Tell her gradually?" I suggested, my voice cracking. She shook her head, pulling away. "No, Nolan. I'm 42. You're just starting out. The world wouldn't understand, and I can't bear hurting anyone else." The truth stung. Logical, yet painful. "So this is goodbye?" She cupped my face, her touch memorizing. "Not forever. Go build your life. If paths cross again, we'll know." Our final kiss was bittersweet, pouring in all the unspoken words. As I left, rain renewing its fall, I glanced back from the porch. She stood in the doorway, arms